All right. I have Bill Robertson on my podcast. Bill,
glad to be here.
I know. I only had to wrangle you into a corner and say, Bill.
And you did. It's true.
I said, I want you on my podcast. He goes, what's that? No, he didn't exactly say that.
No.
He knew. And so this is what's fun about this, right? Okay. When I started this podcast, the name of it is Art Dealer Diaries because it's the stories and the people that run through my life. And that can be a variety of people. And by having a studio in the gallery, every once in a while, somebody just kind of shows up out of the blue and says, oh, I'm here. And I'm like, okay, Bill, I want to talk to you about your life because you have an interesting life. I know this for a fact because you worked for me for, how long would you say? Off and on. I have no idea.
I have no idea either. I was just discussing it with someone out in the gallery, and we weren't quite sure, but I think something about 15 years, I would suspect.
Yes.
Well, sometimes more than others. But.
Yes. You filled in on many occasions, too, and I was in a desperate mode. Bill lives in Albuquerque. Do you still live in Albuquerque, Bill?
I still live in Albuquerque, although not in the same place that I did when I was working for you.
Oh, no. Yeah, I remember when.
I'm famous for moving, so as my friends say. So,
when did you move to Albuquerque, by the way?
I moved to Albuquerque with my parents when I was in 8th grade in December of 1950.
1950, and you were an age. So, okay, so you're born in 1942. Is that the math, correct?
Lousy math.
Well, if you moved in 1950 and you were 8.
No, I was in 8th grade.
Oh, 8th grade. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 8th grade.
Yeah, okay, that makes you even younger, even older.
Exactly.
And
do we really want to get specific? Although anybody who's listening or watching this can figure out.
8th grade is what, like 13 maybe? Like that.
Yes, and you do 13 from 50, and you're really right on.
Yeah, that's World War I stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, 2. Just checking. Anyway, so you got to, why did he go to Albuquerque? Why did your parents move to Albuquerque?
My mother was suffering from rheumatoid, not rheumatoid at that time, but arthritis, and the theory was perhaps the drier air would be better than Kansas City, from which I came.
Yeah, and it probably was.
And it was initially. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Although rheumatoid arthritis was responsible for her death eventually, but yes.
So you basically consider yourself a New Mexican, I would think, right?
Oh, that's funny that you would ask. I have some very, very dear friends, one of whom was born and grew up in Gallup, and is an ardent New Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells me, because I have breakfast on Sundays with her often, she says, Bill, you're absolutely not from the Midwest. You're a New Mexican. Yeah. And I take that as being very flattering.
Yeah, well, 13. Yes, I think you're New Mexican. If you made it through, were you public schools, I assume?
Yes, I graduated from Highland High School.
Yes, okay. Yeah, if you graduate from public school in New Mexico, then you are a New Mexican. I went kindergarten through high school in New Mexico.
Because you were on the other part of the state, though.
Yes, I was. I was from the eastern part.
Exactly.
Flatlands, Llano Estacada. And so when you're growing up let's just say when you got to New Mexico, the land of enchantment, what did you think about it? I'm just curious because it was so different than Kansas City.
My only exposure to it was indirectly. My grandparents lived for a while prior to that time period in Phoenix. And as a little boy, I would get on the train. I would be put on the train and go to Phoenix to visit them.
By yourself?
By myself.
Yeah.
With the help of the local porter to be sure that everything worked out okay.
Yeah.
And then I would spend maybe a couple of weeks in Phoenix with my grandparents, and my grandfather was a contractor and was building houses in Phoenix. And my grandmother then felt that I needed to see as much as I could possibly see. So we wandered around Phoenix, and I saw all the sights of Phoenix. And then on weekends, we would go to the Grand Canyon. We went to the Flagstaff All-Indian Powwow, I think it's called, something like that.
Yeah, the Museum of Northern Arizona has a show, Navajo and a Hopi show every year. Could it be that?
No, this is rodeo.
Oh, it was a rodeo. Okay.
And I think also something not unlike the Gallup ceremonial.
Yeah, okay.
That kind of an activity.
So that kind of was your first
So that was my introduction
to native arts.
Yeah. So then...
Were you all in at that time? Because, I mean, you've been a collector and exceptionally knowledgeable about this really for a very long time.
Yeah. It hadn't taken yet.
Yeah.
So we came to Albuquerque, and let's see, I was in 8th grade, just finishing 8th grade. And I guess where you're going with this is, how did I get interested in Indians? And when I was a junior in high school at Highland, we had to do a research paper. And I had looked at what was the earlier version of the New Mexico magazine, which I think was called Sun Trails or something like that, and had seen an article about Pecos Pueblo. So I thought, I'm going to write a research paper on Pecos Pueblo. And that, together with a neighbor who lived 2 doors down from us, who was much into exploring Indian ruins, took us to an incredible ruin on top of a mesa not that far from Georgia O'Keeffe country.
Yeah, Albuquerque.
And I think I was smitten.
You were hooked, man.
I was.
Yeah.
I think I was bitten by that rattlesnake.
Yeah. What is it about that just intrigues? I know what it was from...
Well, there's a certain romantic aspect to it, kind of. But, there are the ruins of they're the kivas, and you want to know what's happened in those kivas.
Right.
And, these people living in these often spectacular locations, or in the case of Pecos Pueblo, with this incredible history of, being this great trading place between the plains and so on. All of that, I think, just sort of began to add up, and then you could go to real pueblos,
right,
and see real kivas, which you couldn't get into, but you could see them,
right,
and you knew things happened in there. So all of that together with, going to Hopi later.
Yeah,
that's another story.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
And so you graduate from high school.
I graduated from high school, went to UNM, graduated from UNM.
And you went into English?
I had a double major in English and history.
Okay.
With the intent of teaching. I tried a couple of other things in college and thought, this is ridiculous. I want to teach. I know it's not going to be much of a money-making situation, but I'm going to be happier teaching, which I was. And so I ended up, I graduated from UNM.
What year was that?
1959.
Yeah, okay.
And I've forgotten, I can't give you any dates now, but graduation day was X. And I started teaching summer school at Highland, actually, again, a few days before I officially graduated from the University of New Mexico.
Yeah, and you're like 21 or something.
20, actually.
Oh, 20, okay.
And taught there taught in the Albuquerque public schools, in miscellaneous high schools for 29 years.
Oh, yeah, 30 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Long time.
Long time. Yeah.
And one of your students, this always cracks me.
Since I graduated from Highland,
yeah.
One of my students, when I was teaching at Highland, actually in the same room in which I had taken English at Highland, was Bob Gallegos, who is probably fairly well known in this community of which I am currently a part.
Yes, and has also been on this podcast.
It's also been
Yeah, what was Bob like?
Bob was a very good student. He was a football player, and so he was very popular with the kids.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I had him as a sophomore. He was in my sophomore English class.
Mm-hmm.
We won't go into which year. We've talked enough about my age, but we have to give everybody else's age.
Bob doesn't care.
I'm sure not.
And so you do that for 29 years, but at that time, during those times, I start basically 1959, you start, right, for 30 years. You're going to go almost to 1980 teaching, 78, 79.
Yes.
But a lot of stuff happened in Santa Fe and Albuquerque during those years.
Yes. I remember Santa Fe, obviously. I should say this. I was introduced to Santa Fe by my grandmother. We moved to Albuquerque in December of 1950. My grandmother lived, and grandfather lived here. They had moved from Phoenix to here in the interim. And in the last week between Christmas and New Year's, took me to Santa Fe, and we stayed at La Fonda. And so we wandered around, and she introduced me to Santa Fe, and I was smitten with Santa Fe immediately as a kid in the 8th grade. Waited at the Pink Adobe. Wow. And so that was kind of my introduction to New Mexico.
Yeah, and Canyon Road was a dirt road.
We didn't even see Canyon Road.
It was a dirt road.
It was definitely a dirt road because it was a dirt road for a lot longer after that period.
Yeah, to like maybe the mid-'69 or something, right?
I can't remember when that was paved, but I do remember there was a big hullabaloo from the people who lived on it, too. They did not want it paved, no.
Yes, and why is that, do you think?
Well, it lost its
charm,
its authenticity.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it's officially lost that to some extent.
Oh, Santa Fe has changed a great deal. It was just a wonderful place for a number of years. Not that it isn't wonderful now, but it's
different.
It's very different. It was very, very, very quiet in those days.
Yes. Well, for you, though, like you love the opera, they didn't have that.
They did not have the opera then.
Yes.
But they had other things, lots of interesting people.
Yes.
Well, they still have interesting people, but it was a quieter place. That's what it was. Yeah.
And so when did you, as you're teaching school and you're going along it,
yes,
when did you go, okay, I want to start collecting Native American material? Because I know a lot of things you would actually go up to the pueblos and buy from the people and that kind of stuff.
A couple of things happened. One, when I was in high school, my parents gave me for Christmas 2 silkscreen Harrison Begays to hang on the wall of my bedroom.
Yeah.
And gave me 2 pots. I have no idea what prompted them necessarily to do that, except maybe they decided they needed 2 pieces of art on my wall. But at any rate, so they bought those things for me. And I think, without realizing it, they started my interest in collecting. I refer to it nowadays as New Mexicana, because it's become a little bit more Hispanic than Native American now, more recently.
And so when did you start buying your own things?
That's a really good question. When did I first start buying things? I can't even remember what the first thing was. I do remember going to the Enchanted Mesa trading post owned by Fred and Margaret.
Yes.
What was their last name? But it was the best shop in Albuquerque.
Yes. They had
Chase. Fred and Margaret Chase.
They had Helen Hardin's work there, and they had Pablito Velarde's work.
The first piece I bought from them was a Maria pot.
Yes.
Because Helen, Pablita, came every year. I think she came maybe twice a year for shows, and Maria did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow or another, I ended up having a very nice relationship, especially with Margaret Chase. She was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And so bought my first Maria pot from them. I did not buy.
What year approximately would that have been?
Let's see. I graduated from college in 1959. I certainly didn't have expendable change for Maria pots, even though it wasn't that expensive, but nonetheless.
Right.
Probably very shortly thereafter, I would think 60, 61, something like that.
Okay. And do you remember how much that was? I'm just curious. in the 60s.
I still have it.
Of course you do.
I think it was Maria. I think you refer to them as stew bowls. I think that's the. And it was undecorated.
Yes, so it was a Pavatea.
Exactly. And so it probably was $25.
Yeah, that sounds about right in that time frame, early 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then maybe a couple of years later, I bought a feather plate. And I don't remember now how much that cost. It was.
And that was also from the Chases?
Yes.
Yes.
I
even met them. I actually had gone. I've been around long enough to have gone to Enchanted Mesa.
It was a really nice shop.
Yeah, and they had great stuff, and
they had very good taste.
And you'll see, if people are listening to that, you'll see on the back of sometimes Papelita tiles and different things, you'll see their little tag of Enchanted Mesa, which they put on everything, which is smart.
Yeah, it was those open houses which they had for the two women we're talking about, and I'm sure they had open houses for other people, but I don't know who. Were always very, very well attended.
Oh, I bet.
Now, I think they may have had some refreshments, but that seemed to me to be rather secondary to just the opportunity
for Maria and Helen and those. And I assume you got to meet all those individuals?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And chatted with them.
Yes. What was Maria like? I never got to meet her. She died in 1977. I was in college at that.
She was very quiet, but cordial, and seemed to be pleased that somebody would be interested enough to purchase one of her pots.
Right, especially somebody young.
Maybe so.
Yeah, well, $25 was a ton of money for you.
It was a bit of a answer. I didn't have that.
My first Maria pot cost me $320, which is still nothing. That would have been in about 1988, maybe.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
20 years later.
Yeah. There's a had an interesting experience that I cannot be entirely forthcoming with you, but
and the world,
with the world. But I was just in a very interesting house here in the city, where I encountered a pair of Maria Ollas, which I had purchased at one time a number of years ago, which were consigned to a local gallery called Medicine Man.
That's funny.
Yes, you can imagine my shock when I sat down.
Well, I hope happiness.
And saw them. Well, it was like old home week.
Yeah, there's a lot of this have gone around.
It was really quite amusing, and the current owner was quite amused by my story because I was forthcoming about how that happened.
It's quite tickled. And so as you go on through life, right, you continue to buy native arts and...
Yes, my interest in Indians was actually further influenced by, I had the opportunity just shortly after I graduated from college, returning to community college courses at the university in archaeology and anthropology. And Florence Holly Ellis, one of the great female archaeologists of the last century, was teaching her graduate courses to the Albuquerque community in her community college courses. One of the students in the class was a woman with whom I was quite familiar, and her son was taking the graduate classes. He was getting exactly the same classes during the day that we were getting the classes at night when we went to community college, and they were all about various aspects of Native American culture, and I really learned a lot as a result of those classes.
And that even spurred you more?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you think at any time you go, maybe I shouldn't be doing English, maybe I should be, an archaeologist or anthropologist, or even, dealing in Native American arts?
Well, I was really the archaeology aspect of things really popped into my mind, but I was happy teaching. I really enjoyed it. So I guess my outlet was beginning to collect things. So so along the way, I began putting together a collection of... Oh, the idea initially, that's right. My initial idea was it would be nice to have a pot from each of the pueblos.
Mm-hmm.
And since my parents had provided me with the initial collection of 2, that was carved Santa Clara piece. And frankly, the other piece was an inconsequential piece of Acoma pottery.
Yeah.
So I considered I had a start.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have that 1.5. I had 1.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how it began. And several of the people in that class with Florence Holly Ellis had been collecting pottery from miscellaneous people in miscellaneous pueblos, and they sort of took me in their influence and sort of picked me up, and so I went with them and ended up spending quite a bit of time with them at Cochiti,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore picked up several different Cochiti pieces. Then
Did you get a Helen Cordero?
I did not. This was slightly before,
Yeah, 64 is when she started doing
Yes.
her
Yes.
storytellers.
and I think I have one little piece of hers. Oh, I'm pretty sure I have one little single person
Mm-hmm.
that was hers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not positive of that. I certainly did not know. She didn't have a name
No.
at all, like as she currently has. So the answer to your question is no. But Teresita Romero,
Yes.
I bought several pieces from her. Particularly, I was interested because I always felt her period pieces looked kind of eccentric.
Yeah, she had a good sense of humor,
She did, and
and it was good potter.
Yes.
Very good potter. I think she's underrated.
yeah, I don't know why people don't click their heels together about her.
They will at some point.
Okay, and I had 3. I think I may still only have 2 of them left. Then we went to Laguna, to one of the villages. I think it was Sita. And then we went to Acoma. So I commissioned Lucy Lewis to do me a piece.
Mm. And you knew about her at that point.
Absolutely.
She was already
Oh, absolutely.
extremely well known. And this is her early, mid-60s kind of?
Early to mid-60s, yes. Yeah.
Because it's about when she started signing her pots, actually.
Yes. And I thought I'd never get the pot, but it finally did. But
How long did it take?
months and months and months and months and trip after trip after trip
Yeah.
to Acoma, to her house
Yeah,
to see if she'd done it yet.
yeah.
At any rate. Then
What was she like, by the way?
not cordial.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
And
she lived up on the
if
top.
she may have had a house up there, but that is not where I went.
Oh, okay. She does have a house up
Okay.
on the-
Oh, it makes it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But no, that's not where she was in residence
I see.
For her pottery making.
Yes, that makes sense.
I think I could find the house now. You can actually, I think, almost see it from I-40.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well,
Do you still have your Lucy?
I do.
Nice.
Yes. And then we also went to, and all of this, I am now pulling a blank on
Who else you went?
who else from whom I got the beautiful Acoma bowl.
Like Maurizi Chino or...
Thank you. That's exactly what it was.
Well, I know you have great taste, so if I was going to go to the next person, it'd be Maurizi Chino.
It was. It was Marie Chino.
Yeah.
For whom I traded the bowl for, I got the bowl for a mixmaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a trade. It was a trade. I think that's the one and only time I did that.
Yeah.
But somehow I think someone had told me that she wanted one. And I think that's how that worked out.
Yes.
And then I picked up a few other little items from a couple of the other Acoma ladies, Sarah Garcia,
Mm-hmm.
and Anita Loudon.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have those pieces as well from that period.
And you started going to Hopi as well, didn't you?
Then, when I started sort of simultaneous to all of this, I began working on a graduate degree at UNM, at this time in history, and I was the subject of the thesis was going to be some aspect of Hopi. The history of contact between the Hopis and the Spanish. That was the concept. And a friend of mine, a fellow who taught at Highland and who was acquainted with some women with whom he had taught when he was teaching on the Apache reservation, one of the Apache reservations, were now teaching at the not at Palaka, at Kings Canyon, in the Kings Canyon Elementary School. So we went, so he said, "You've never been to Hopi?" He said, "Well, I'll take you over. We'll visit my friends, and then we'll go over and see the Pueblos for the first time." So we went and then had dinner with these lovely women. And then we went to Hopi. I visited Hopi for the first time, and I was absolutely captivated by the Hopi Pueblos. And at that point, of course, didn't meet anybody other than in passing.
Right.
So we just were visiting the area. And that began then my spending a great deal of time from that point on through about 1970, really, going back and forth from Albuquerque to the Hopi Pueblos. I developed a friendship with a very fine carver at Noaribe, who recognized and appreciated my interest in their religious life. And so I would periodically get little postcards from him saying, "Come because there will be ceremonies on the following weekends."
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and developed a nice friendship with Garnet Pavatea,
Mm-hmm.
who was such a lovely woman, and picked up a couple of people.
Yeah.
We're
Really good potters, yeah.
She's an excellent potter. There's a big piece of hers sitting on my dining room table, even as we speak, as a matter of fact. So she saw that I got into Akiva to see a puppet dance, and that was the first of the puppet dances I saw. So she kind of, in an interesting sort of way, kind of mentored me into Hopiedom, I guess you'd say.
Garnet.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And she made, let's see, what was it? Oh, yeah, she made a wonderful prune cake. There's a little detail for all of your listeners. At any rate, she's a lovely woman. Then one summer I spent at Hopi, the summer of 1968, I think it was.
Mm.
So during that summer, then I rented a house from Helen Naha.
Feather one.
The feather one, exactly. And purportedly lived next door to Puwakas, which is the Hopi word for witches. Although I seem to have survived. Yeah.
And so you lived at Hopi for a summer?
For a summer, 2 months.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was a wonderful experience. It really was. Obviously, for somebody who's grown up entirely in urban, almost entirely at least, urban circumstances, the house that I rented from Helen was not exactly the most modern in the world, but
I'm sure not.
But it worked very nicely, as a matter of fact, with a little help from my friends.
Yes.
But as soon as my friends found out that, where was Bill living this summer? He was in Hopi. Well, maybe we should go see him. So I became sort of a wayside inn for miscellaneous people or folks who spread their bedrolls out on my floor because there was only one room. And
did you ever meet Evely Sabatia? Was she there? She came to Hopi right in that time frame.
No. I didn't meet her, but I met her future husband, if I remember
I mean,
correctly.
Charles Loloma? I don't know if they were ever married, but...
Okay, yes, I didn't... he had a tiny shop at Hook Villa.
Yes.
And so I went there. I could not afford Charles Lolama's pieces even then.
Yeah, that was 68. When you were there at 68, right?
Yes. I'm trying to remember whether that was exactly when I met him. It could have been another time.
Right.
But it probably was about that time, certainly.
But you went to his shop and...
I went to his shop.
Right.
I did go to his shop.
Googled over his stuff.
Yes, because I've never been that interested in Native American jewelry anyway, but his pieces were spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
End of statement. They were beautiful.
And what was he like?
He was pleasant, but I wouldn't, that's the extent of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was making a lot of things and had a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And really, when you're there in 68, that's kind of when things are starting to peak as far as, not even peak, but it's very much on the upslope of people wanting Native American jewelry, like squash blossoms and that whole craze that happened from about that time to the early 70s. Yeah. Could you feel that interest?
Well, if so, at the Pueblos, no, because I was present, and I was living at in Polaca,
mm-hmm.
at the base of First Mesa, and tended to sort of move from Shapolavi, because there was a fellow at Shapolavi whose family I got to kind of know, and then I would visit all the other several of the other villages throughout that period, and I was never aware of very much of the presence of Anglos like me.
Mm-hmm.
There were, at the time I was there, 2 other researchers on miscellaneous projects. Frankly, it's been so long ago, I don't remember who they were, nor even what their interests were, aside from the fact that they were there and doing research work there. But in terms of people coming and going, non-Indians coming and going, I wasn't aware of it particularly. Because I lived very, very close to the road up First Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would have been aware of, I hate to use the word traffic, but
right.
but that sort of thing, and I wasn't.
Yes.
I wasn't. By this time, I was particularly interested in Kachina dolls, so I was spending a lot of time collecting Kachina dolls.
Yeah, but contemporary ones primarily.
Yes.
The carvers.
Oh, yes. Primarily from carvers, but also from the then little trading post at the base of First Mesa, owned by one of the big trading post names of that.
Babbitt or something like that.
It wasn't. I don't believe it was Babbitt, but yes, you're right.
Roust or somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the fellow who was in charge of that particular trading post was a very pleasant fellow. It was a tiny place,
mm-hmm.
in what may have once been just a little fashion service station.
And so you were there in 68 for 2 months, right?
2 months in 68, yes.
Yeah. And do you feel that time changed the way you see the world? Spending time in Hopi?
Oh, what an interesting question. Yes, I suppose it did.
I would think.
I suppose nobody has ever asked me that question before. Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And can you put that into words, what it did?
I think, first of all, the people there were, by and large, there were some exceptions, but for the most part, they were very warm and very cordial and very kind. And that, together with seeing as many ceremonies as I did, because I mentioned moments ago that I saw these puppet dances, but I've also saw a number of other ceremonies. And there was a kind of mystic quality about that that I found meaningful.
Spiritual.
I did.
I can see that. I feel that from native arts. So.
Yeah, it's it was, and I guess maybe to conclude the Hopi chat, I have not been back since 1971. Initially, I think for a long time, I was reluctant to go back because other events intervened in my life which precluded my doing so. And maybe I didn't want to go back because I wanted it to be the way it had been.
So special, yeah.
Yeah, and now it's been so long.
Yes.
So long.
50 years, by the way. Half a century.
Exactly. And I know my understanding is there have been more restrictions perhaps on visitations.
Yes, there are. You should, though. You should actually go back. I'm sure there's probably some carvers that you still know, some potters, or their grandkids or great.
Probably
just to see it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 85.
Yeah.
It would be nice to go and
it's
get another dose of.
I would. I think I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I really think I would. If the time there certainly had a profound influence on me. There is no question about it.
I would think.
Yeah. Those people were very special. The place was very special. And their ceremonies were very special. One little addition to that, one little memory that is quite wonderful, I thought, at least it seems to me. I was wandering around Walpi one day, and I don't remember when. I don't think this was on one of the other trips, not just that one, when I stayed there. I happened upon a woman who couldn't really talk to me because she was, at least at the moment, she said, "But come and join me. I'm making piki." So we went into the room that was, or I should say the space that was entirely devoted to the making of piki. And I sensed that I had just walked into the 18th century. And
piki is a bread, for those who don't know what that is.
Yes, it's
a thin bread.
It's tissue paper thin. Normally it's made of blue corn, so therefore it's normally kind of not really blue so much, a sign of a coal-colored, kind of a gray color when it finally comes out. And there was her piki stone, and but next to it, of course, were the miscellaneous grinding bins where the corn would have been ground from one texture to the other until it was the right one for whatever she was making. And there she was with this big Hopi dough bowl filled with batter, which she was smearing on the hot piki stone with her bare hand and picking one up and then placing it to the side and then doing it the next one. Then she would put the second one on top of the first. That would soften the one below. Then she could roll it up so it would not break, because if you don't know what piki is like, it's tissue paper thin, and it also is very, very brittle.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's my piki story.
Clearly it's stuck.
Yeah, it was really...
And that was...
So I watched that
yeah.
for quite some time, because it was mesmerizing. It's like watching anyone, a carpenter, for example, at his work. It's like watching someone who truly knows what he or she is doing, and you are almost hypnotized by the rhythm of it.
Yes, that's right. And you can find that worldwide in many, many.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be at Hopi, but it happened to be in that place. Yeah.
And I think of that time frame you're there, and it's such a tumultuous time in America. I mean, 68, we lose Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, the Democratic debacle in Chicago,
Yes.
Vietnam War. You have the Tet Offensive. I mean, we have a presidential election. I mean, and you're in Hopi.
And I'm Hopi, yes.
Which is probably the best place to be in the world
Exactly.
at that time.
It was quite wonderful.
Yeah.
It really was.
Uh-huh.
And it was nice, as I mentioned earlier, I did have a semi-flood of guests coming, which was very, very nice because I could provide them with a little place to stay. And, of course, I ended up preparing food for them and went out and hunted up cactus in bloom for flowers in the middle of the table just for that. Even though I didn't have a bathroom. Nor, let's see, what didn't I have? I didn't have hot water either.
Yes.
But I did have hot water in the house.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I had water in the house, and some friends brought over a little refrigerator.
Yes. So you have some electricity.
Well, no, I was hooked up to propane.
Oh, okay.
So that that's what I learned was of all of the modern conveniences, the refrigerator is the most important.
Yeah.
Particularly when you live 70 miles from the closest grocery store.
Yes, I believe that. For milk and eggs and butter and all that stuff. Yeah. And so as you go on your journey of being a English teacher,
yes.
This whole time you continue to envelop yourself into native arts and going to things like Indian Market and that kind of thing?
I went to Indian Market, yes, for a while, and finally gave up on Indian Market only because of too many people.
So many tourists.
It was just, I felt as if fighting your way to look over somebody's shoulder to look at somebody's goods was just not worth the effort. So Indian Market didn't make it for me, I must say. Although I became then, also in the same period, again in the 60s, very much interested in the local Pueblos ceremonies, especially on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Taos.
Actually on Christmas Eve, the Santo Domingo, Cochiti, San Felipe are the places to go. Or, pardon me, were the places to go, I presume so still, perhaps, maybe. And they were absolutely... It made for a long Christmas Eve, I must say. You came home on Christmas Day and you really weren't worth very much to the throng in your house. Right. But I loved those, and I frequented dances in the Pueblos in that period. Then in the 70s, I began and also began involved in remodeling old adobes. So I did I remodeled, I think, 5 houses along the way. So that became I
remember staying in one of them over by the museum. Yeah. That one that had numerous little casitas.
That's right.
Yeah, it was very lovely.
Yeah, I enjoyed that place a lot. And I'm living not far from that, as a matter of fact. No.
And at some point you start working with other dealers to, help them or... Like for me, you worked for 15 years, but you also worked for Nija Matucci, right?
Yes. Yes. Let's see, how did all that happen? I retired from teaching in 1988. Mm-hmm. That's what started all this.
Mm-hmm. 29 years.
And yes. And I had... been offered, I would not probably have been offered taken this job, retired in 88, except for the fact that I was offered this interesting job with a new antique gallery in Albuquerque, which dealt in very high-end Spanish colonial furniture and appropriate accessories, I guess you'd say. So I thought, this is not an offer that I'm going to get any frequently. Right. So I retired and took it. And it lasted several years. It was a wonderful experience, and I learned a tremendous amount.
What was that gallery's name? Do you remember?
Yes, it was called the Richard Worthen Gallery.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Okay, it was at 14th and Central in Albuquerque.
Yes.
And then when it closed, then Nidra Matucci took over that same space. And I became the director of that particular gallery, but that only lasted about a year.
And that was like an annex of Finn Gallery?
That was an annex of Finn Gallery.
I see.
Yes. That lasted a year, and I think she wasn't too interested in furthering that. So...
But you got to learn about
paintings,
right?
Then I learned about miscellaneous paintings, etc.
Right.
Through that, which was not necessarily the focus of the previous gallery. Along the way, I'd also become interested in antiques and even thought about opening an antique shop, but that didn't happen.
And had you met Al at that point, Al Anthony?
No, I don't think so. I'm not quite sure. Wait a minute. How did I meet Al?
It's a good question, because I know I met you through him.
Yes, we met each other through him. That is correct. But that was later.
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember how that happened.
But sometime in that late 80s, kind of.
Yes.
Early 90s.
It would be in the 90s, I think.
I mean, I could see you being over there because of all this pottery.
That's right.
You know, it would be a natural.
Yeah. Although I was always looking for things else in interesting and odd places.
Yes. A little better price structure, maybe.
A little better price structure.
I get it.
Yeah. So, anyway. Yeah.
And you could find those things probably in Albuquerque, right? When you were, especially in the 60s and 70s.
Exactly.
Antique stores.
Oh, you'll like this story. When I was going out to Lucy Lewis's, there was a store that sold, I can't remember what else they sold, but among other things, they had quite a collection of pottery. They had a huge collection of San Ildefonso polychrome pieces. I mean, just one after another, after another, after another. And I didn't like those.
What a shame.
What a shame. I really... Because I was interested in the new pots from the Pueblos, remember?
Right, yeah. And these were just old pots.
These were just these
turn of the century.
Dingy pots.
Yeah.
Oh, I have frequently laughed at myself about that omission. Anyway, sorry about that. I got off the subject.
But you would go and shop different places.
Oh, yeah, I did.
I would think Albuquerque would be a tremendous place to find things, too.
Topeka, Kansas isn't bad either.
Where?
Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
I had a great aunt who lived in Topeka. Came back from having visited her once in the middle of all this. I'm not quite sure when, with some nice little treasures.
Yeah, no, I mean, people don't understand how different it was, than it is today. You could go to an antique store or, any gallery, even a Native American gallery, whatever, and find things.
Yes, you could.
And because you couldn't really shop it to the world, things would be differently priced. You might have a really good gallery that might have something that was way undervalued because they just didn't understand it. And it was hard to find the resources to know what it is, unlike today.
Yeah. And some of your listeners might be interested. When I went on that sojourn to Topeka, by the way, that was when T.N. Luther, who was the great Southwest book man, who eventually ended up in Taos, was still living in Topeka, and that's where his shop was.
And so what did you do after Nidra?
After that, then I worked for several years in Albuquerque for a custom furniture store that made New Mexican style furniture. And for several years. And then I was lured away from that by another company that we will not go into. A 1-year unhappy experience.
Okay.
And then I thought, I've worked enough. I'm going to quit. And then I made the blunder of going up to Santa Fe taking some people that I didn't know very well on a tour of Santa Fe.
Yes.
And I said, if you don't mind, I want to go and say hello to a friend of mine who has this gallery on Canyon Road. And Mark, do you want to continue the story?
No, keep going. You probably remember better than I do.
So anyway, I went into Mark's shop, gallery on the 600 block. Was it 700 block?
Yeah, 707. Probably.
707. 707, yeah. And simply to say hello. And so, and there actually was a piece that I pounced upon and said, I want to buy this. And you didn't know how much it was going to be, but I ended up getting it anyway. And then you said, Al tells me that you're not doing anything these days. And then you wanted to know whether I might be interested in spending some time this summer.
Right.
In the shop. That's right. And then the following spring, I came down here for 2 months.
Yes. And then you worked for me.
Forever.
Afterwards. Seems like it.
Back and forth from Albuquerque to Santa Fe.
I know.
With some degree of frequency.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. A lot. I mean, there was times you were working full.
I was working full time. That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And other times less.
Yes.
And it seemed to me we had a wonderful situation because when I didn't want to work, you told me that was okay. And when you needed me to work and I hadn't really particularly wanted to, I was willing to do so.
You were always very good about that.
Yeah.
I always really respected and appreciated that. If I needed someone, or if I needed you, basically, not just someone, because you can't just, you can get just someone, but they will do a horrific job at doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
They have to have the ability to not only understand the material, but be able to translate that to other people, the same passion like you do. Clearly, anybody who watches this, listens to this, they go, okay, yeah, he was great. Yeah. If you lived in Tucson, you'd be working for me now.
Yeah.
If you would.
Oh, no, please, no.
Just like Jerry. And he's just a little younger than you, and he's been working here for 25 years or longer. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. At any rate, yeah.
So, and then I know toward the end it was like, okay, I'm tired of driving. I remember.
Well, that was that, and also I was taking care of my father.
Yes.
Who had been widowed.
I remember that too.
Yeah. So that was the real pressure.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's always
because I was feeling guilty.
Yeah.
About not being home, and he was in his 90s.
Yes. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Fortunately, I had a place for him to stay. So
yeah, and that would count. And so after we kind of went away from Santa Fe and you did your thing,
mm-hmm.
What all have you been doing since then? Besides going to the opera, which I've seen you at.
I go to the opera, which I had been doing I started, the opera opened in 1957, and I started going in 1958. I missed the first season.
Wow.
I haven't been going literally every year.
Yes.
But I've often had season tickets there. Yeah. But aside from that, I've been changing all these houses, moving in these houses, and each time doing complete renovation. Yeah, so that's always taken
But you enjoy doing it.
Oh, I love doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, I could almost be talked into doing one tomorrow. If there was something.
Do you think you should have ever been like an interior designer?
I would have really enjoyed renovating houses.
I could see that.
I would really have done, yeah.
Because I remember your houses. I remember your house. I remember very well your place that was over by the museum, both your house and all the little casitas, which were just fantastic. I bet you'd kind of like to have those back right about now.
I would have, yes. Yeah. But I currently have a house of which I'm quite fond. Again, it's on the National Historic List. Nice. So, yeah. So, done that. But the thing that I have become embarrassingly addicted to is genealogy. Like all the old folks these days. Everybody seems to be into that particular hobby.
But you've been there before because you were interested in Hopi history. I mean, it's not really...
It's just a continuation, except it's personal.
Yeah, it's yours.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Very good observation. Very good observation. Yeah. And I really spent an inordinate amount of time doing it. I'm traveling back and forth to Kentucky or Virginia for that purpose.
Right.
And we'll be doing it again in May. And
because this is where family is still.
No, family is not.
Yes.
But I'm trying to push the knowledge about those earlier generations.
I see.
And I'm, as we say in that world, there are brick walls that need to be toppled. And I'm about had it with that, but we'll see. And then I've several trips to Europe and have occupied my time, which I really love. I love traveling, but I'm getting a little wary about traveling now.
Yeah, it's a little over. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have seen such a dramatic change in the Native American art, everything. From when you first really became aware, when you're 13, and to now. What are the takeaways, good and bad, that you've seen in that period of 60, 70 years, 80 years, 70?
I think the thing that I find most, the word isn't disturbing, but unsettling, I guess, or disappointing, is things have become, the native materials have become so over-commercialized, and the level of design has become so free from what it was originally that the idea of its being called Native American doesn't seem to apply so much. It's contemporary jewelry or it's contemporary art now rather than an extension of Native American art. I think it's maybe time that people begin to think of it as being part of the mainstream.
Oh, I think they are.
Yeah, rather than...
Rose Simpson would be a very good example.
Rather than a continuation, rather than a continuum. That's the word I want.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to say, or what you are saying.
Yeah. I think that's kind of just off the cuff. I think that's one of the things I see. Pieces are beautiful, but I think, where do I see, the continuation of wanting to call it Native American art? Maybe it's time to call it art.
I've been calling it fine art for a very long time.
You get my drift.
Yeah, well, to me it is, it will, no matter, in my opinion, no matter how changed it goes, even if it's completely unrecognizable, I don't think you can't separate that from the native voice that comes from millennia of being Americans.
Yeah.
Having that spirituality that you felt and is still inside you at this very moment goes to all those pieces in some way or another. So it might not be in the traditional sense that you might see it. Something, especially how you've seen it for all these years, especially doing it from ground up kind of thing. But to me, even if it's the most contemporary piece of art, I bet you talk to them and within 30 seconds you go, oh yeah, this definitely is grounded from a different origin source, regardless of what it looks like visually. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. However, people see it just how I see it.
Yeah.
But I'm still learning. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Exactly.
That is why I ask these questions. I want to see, you're a man who's had a lot of experience. That's one of the reasons, besides I think you're a fantastic person, I wanted to have you on to hear that voice of what you have experienced, since 1959 to, actually 1950, but till now.
It's been a long time.
70 years, that you've been aware of it. You've seen and met some of the great people. Yes. Is there any person that you met that we haven't discussed that you thought was a very important or interesting person in this field or artist? I know there's so many, but
there were several doll carvers that were very very good friends and very kind to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not prepared to. I don't think I want to share.
I get it.
Publicly, how kind they were in terms of sharing their world with me.
Yes.
And even though, and I think in both cases they're both deceased, but
Right.
nonetheless,
The bond's still there.
the bond's still there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it helps. And those relationships, I should say, are why I have these incredible ties to Hopi in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than anything that I could say otherwise. Yeah.
I think it's a great place to end.
Okay.
Unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, there's something there. What else? Anything else?
No, I don't think so. No. That's good. That's a good place to end.
Well, we've known each other for over 30 years as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah. How do you not age is the question.
I do.
No, you don't.
I do.
You always have.
I don't know. I think part of it is trying to have as positive an attitude towards life as possible.
Yeah.
Is important.
Yeah.
And I that attempt on my part, I certainly can't say that I'm always positive, but I try to be. I think began consciously when I made the decision to choose teaching as a career, because I knew that, as I mentioned earlier, that I was not going to make very much money. So I realized that I couldn't complain about not making very much money because I chose not to make very much money.
Right.
And sometimes, at least in the teaching field, there are people who are rather bitter about the fact that they're not making very much money. Well, ... handwriting was on the wall from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I've always felt that it was important to try to attempt, at least, to project as much positive, to be as positive as possible.
Mm-hmm. And you also worked in the art field just as long as you did as in the teaching field, interestingly enough.
I guess I did, really.
Yeah. So you've had two careers.
In a way, I have.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Imagine the amount of material that you learned, from others and reading and being around it for 15 years with me.
Yes, and I have learned wherever I've been, I've learned a great deal from the people with whom I've worked and from the material with which I've worked, because the material teaches you.
Yeah, it does. No, it definitely does.
It does, without even having to do research on it.
Yes.
Which is important too, and I'm not trying to negate that or diminish that, but it's important to see it first.
But developing your eye.
Exactly.
Yes, just like my little Tasuki/San Juan pot we have on the table. First thing we said is that, are you sure? Exactly. I said, yes, I am. And then I look at it and go, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, you have little faith.
But that's, being around the material and the people, they both help.
And the people who are interested in the arts are, be they Anglo art or Native American art or Hispanic art, because they're interested in these things, they too are interesting.
Yes.
Each in his or her own way.
Yes, I think so. I think if you support the arts, it sets you apart in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And they always have something interesting to contribute for you to learn from.
Yes. All right, Bill, thank you for letting me corner you. I know you were like, I'll just share this with my viewers. I'd love to have you on my podcast. And he said, what would anyone want to hear me speak, what do I have to say? Well, I think we've answered that question.
Well, you've heard it quite a bit.
Yes, I think you had a lot to say.
Okay.
Thank you, my friend.